Chapter 12. Flight Plans. While I was working in the bookshop, Lily Alice told Nancy, I walked to the back room to ask Mr. Stromberg a question. Just like the other time I told you about, he was talking on the phone in a low tone. But I caught one thing he said that might have something to do with your case. He said to the other person, "You have your ticket? No one will..." With all those students. I didn't catch the one part of the sentence. Lily Alice asked Nancy what she thought the missing word might be. It could be any number of things, Nancy said slowly. Of course, it might be something completely innocent. But if Mr. Stromberg were talking to one of the gang, the missing part might have been recognize you or suspect you. It probably was, the Chinese girl agreed. I wonder who the person could have been. And I wonder, said Nancy, what the ticket is for. It might be for travel, for the theater, for some sports event. That is one reason why I called you, Lily Alice broke in quickly. I said maybe I could help you. On a certain flight to Hong Kong from New York, the whole tourist section of the plane has been reserved for Chinese and American students from Columbia University. Nancy was excited over the information. Only I doubt that any students are mixed up in this racket of Mr. Stromberg's. Lily Alice said she was not thinking of the tourist section of the plane. The first class section is open to all passengers. I thought the person Mr. Stromberg was talking to might possibly be among those people. Nancy was thrilled. Lily Alice, I believe this is a stroke of genius on your part. How soon does this plane leave? In 3 days. It's for a 10-day vacation in Hong Kong. Lily Alice chuckled softly. I understand that the tourist section has not been entirely filled. Perhaps, if you care to go to Hong Kong yourself, I can arrange for you to have one of the seats. Nancy felt a surge of excitement over this possibility. She thanked Lily Alice and said she would let her know if she wanted a reservation. As a matter of fact, my father and I were planning to go to Hong Kong sometime soon. Maybe we could take this flight. But the tourist section is only for students, Lily Alice reminded the young sleuth. My father could go first class, Nancy told her. He might spot the suspect without being recognized. I'll try to obtain a list of the passengers who have signed up so far. Do you think Mr. Stromberg may be one of them? The Chinese girl asked. Possibly, Nancy replied. But if so, I'm sure he'll be traveling under an assumed name, and I would have to see him to identify him. But I can alert the police anyway, and also tell them other members of the gang may be aboard. She thanked Lily Alice for the helpful information, then at once called Captain Gray. He too felt that perhaps Nancy had picked up an important clue. I'll call you back and read you the list of first-class passengers, he promised, as soon as I get them. Hardly half an hour had gone by when he telephoned. The passengers' names were in alphabetical order, and none was familiar to Nancy until he came to the T's. Mrs. Horace Truesdale, Nancy exclaimed. You know her? The officer asked quickly. Well, no, not exactly. But twice I saw her in Stromberg's bookshop. She seemed to be a regular customer. That doesn't prove anything, of course, Captain Gray said. Nevertheless, I will find out more about her and let you know. He read the rest of the list of passengers, but none was known to Nancy. Within a short time, the officer once more called Nancy, this time to report that there was nothing suspicious about Mrs. Horace Truesdale. She was a widow who lived alone in a middle-class apartment house. She's reputed to be a great reader and often goes on trips to visit friends. The officer finished his conversation by telling Nancy that there was still no news on any of the suspects in the Chi Chae-Soon case. But members of the force will be on hand to watch everyone boarding the plane to Hong Kong. Later that evening, Nancy telephoned her father and asked him how soon he was going to Hong Kong. The lawyer chuckled. Fess up, my dear. What's on your mind? His daughter laughed, then quickly related the entire story regarding recent developments in the mystery and told him of the flight to Hong Kong which some Columbia students were taking. "I'd like to go on the flight," Nancy said. "And Dad, I wish that you would go along in the first-class section. You could look over the passengers to see if you think any of them might be suspects." After a pause, Mr. Drew said, "I believe I could leave here in a couple of days. That would work out very nicely. I really should get to Hong Kong to interview the heirs involved in that contested will I told you about." After further conversation, father and daughter agreed that it might be wise if the two traveled as if they were strangers. "I'm sure," the lawyer added, "that the plan will work out to good advantage." Nancy said she had another request to make. "I'd love to have Bess and George accompany us." Mr. Drew approved this idea at once. "The girls will not only help you, but may prove to be a safety factor. I'll phone the Marvins and Fanes and find out if they'll give permission." "Wonderful!" Nancy exclaimed. Then she giggled, saying as she had done ever since she was a little girl, "I'll keep my fingers crossed." "I suppose," said Mr. Drew, "that you will want to make your own reservations through Columbia University. I'll let you know the result of my calls to Bess's and George's families. Then you can borrow money from your Aunt Eloise to purchase the tickets." "And I'll notify Ned Nickerson of our coming," Nancy added. "He can arrange accommodations for us in Hong Kong." "A good idea," Mr. Drew approved. "But I think I had better do this, in case you're being watched. One of the gang might pick up the information." "All right, Dad." Within an hour, Mr. Drew called back to say that Bess and George had been given permission to go on the trip. Nancy's chums were elated. "Oh boy!" George cried. "If Chi-Che is in Hong Kong, what a ball we'll have while finding her!" "Yes," said Bess. "But we just must save some time to buy clothes there." Then she twinkled. "Do you suppose Ned will bring along a couple of dates for George and me?" George grinned. "He probably will. But maybe you'd better go on a diet, Bess. Your huge appetite may frighten the boys away." The other girls laughed. "Oh, George!" What had started out to be a worrisome evening now took a turn of merriment. Nancy used the kitchen phone to call Lily Alice and asked her to get plane reservations for the three girls in the tourist section of the Hong Kong flight. "This is very exciting," said the Chinese girl. "I hope you have a wonderful time and solve the mystery also. I shall find out at once about getting seats on the plane and call you back." For the second time that evening, Nancy received good news. The 3 seats were available. Lily Alice told Nancy where at the university she could pay for the reservations. "There is only one possible worry," the Chinese girl said. "If any Columbia students wish to make last-minute reservations, you will have to give up the seats." "I understand," said Nancy. To herself, she added that she would cross her fingers. Bess and George declared they too fervently hoped that their trip to Hong Kong would not have to be canceled. As the girls prepared for bed, they discussed the clothes they would need. "I guess," Nancy decided, "the clothes we have with us will be plenty for the trip. We'll buy anything more abroad anyhow." "Isn't it fortunate that we all had vaccinations recently?" Bess said happily. "It certainly is," Nancy agreed. "And I've heard that it's possible to obtain passports right here in New York in case of emergency. I'm sure Captain Gray will certify to the emergency for us." As Aunt Eloise and her 3 guests were preparing breakfast in the kitchen the next morning, Nancy said, "I'd like to go to Chinatown once more and see if I can pick up any further clues in the mystery." "Suppose we go this evening and have dinner," Miss Drew suggested. "There is a delightful restaurant only 2 doors from that shop where you found the Fire Dragon stationery, Nancy." This plan was agreed upon. The group decided to arrive promptly at 6 o'clock, since Aunt Eloise said that all the food was cooked to order and there would be a long wait. "I want to visit that stationery store again," Nancy said. "I know it's open in the evening. While we're waiting for dinner to be cooked, I can go there and talk to the proprietor. Maybe some of the gang have been in his shop again." At exactly 6 o'clock, Nancy and her friends entered the attractive restaurant. All the Chinese and American diners were eating their food with chopsticks. "I'll never be able to manage that and get enough to eat," Bess said. Her companions laughed. Aunt Eloise and the girls ordered Peking duck and bean sprouts, which were to follow bird's nest soup. "And now, if you'll excuse me a few minutes," said Nancy, "I'll just walk over to the stationery store." Nancy went out to the narrow sidewalk and turned toward the shop. As she passed the next store, with apartments above it, an object came hurtling down toward her. The next second, it hit Nancy square on the back of the head. She fell to the pavement, unconscious. End of chapter 12.